You're hauled into a police station. You're fingerprinted and photographed, but you don't understand what's going on. Everyone around you is speaking a language that you just simply cannot understand. You beg for an interpreter, but they deny you one. You're brought to court. You're told that your sibling, that's barely 17, has to interpret for you. This situation sounds like something that would either happen in a movie or in a third world country, but this actually happened to Jason J.T. Tozier. He's actually a deaf community liaison for helping educate to advance the rights of the deaf, or heard. This happened to him 20 years ago. He was thrown in jail for a minor inconvenience. He couldn't hear the police officer ask him to step out of his vehicle. Because he couldn't hear him, he didn't respond, and he was sent to jail. His brother was told to interpret for him. The judicial system did not provide him an interpreter like they're supposed to. He was sentenced to a week in jail for doing nothing wrong. But why is this a problem? What causes this? Many would say that the cause was that JT is deaf. He couldn't understand him. But the real reason is that the police were ignorant to the needs of him and the needs of a deaf person to function in our hearing world. However, it isn't just the police. There are over 38 million deaf citizens in the United States. And see, when I looked that up, I didn't realize just how many there were. Out of roughly 340 million people in the country, 38 million are deaf. And so, with so many deaf people surrounding us, truly there is very little being done to accommodate them. Widespread ignorance to the deaf culture and community is a problem faced by millions across America. By addressing the problem, we can further examine it, see why it occurs, and seek solutions. Deaf culture ignorance is the major issue. Several deaf people are arrested for resisting arrest simply because they can't hear the officer in order to comply. There are actually thousands of deaf people in prisons around the country, but only 6 prisons in the United States have a video phone for them to call their family or their friends or even their attorney. According to the Huffington Post, Felix Garcia, a deaf man in Florida, was actually framed for murder by his own children in the 1980s because without proper education back then and without a proper attorney, he only had an understanding of his rights that a 4th grader has. Even though his children eventually came out and said that they're the ones that committed murder, he's still in prison today for a crime everyone knows he didn't do. Everyday life is also a challenge. It's not just with the court systems. When someone that's deaf goes to a job interview, they may be able to pass by for a little bit if they were taught how to speak, even though that is very difficult for them. As soon as an employer hears that they're deaf, they may say it's for other reasons, but the real reason they won't hire them is because of that. And even though that's illegal, it happens every day. Not only is it with finding a job, but also going to college. Many higher education systems do not accommodate for a deaf student in their class. They do not have ASL interpreters. They do not have a subtitle on their PowerPoint. They have nothing to accommodate for that. And so many deaf individuals cannot go to professional colleges. They have to go to a deaf college. And it's separating them from maybe even friends or family that are hearing. And then there's the emergency responders. Many states have implemented a text to 911 to where you can actually text 911 to get help, but many haven't. And so when someone who is deaf calls in, they hope that someone answers. They hope that the person on the other end can understand them, but they can't hear them. Even if they have a little bit of hearing, it's not enough to understand what's going on over a phone. And that has actually caused many different issues. There was once a deaf man was being abused by his partner, and she was abusing him. And so his friend called the cops and even told them that the guy was deaf. The cops arrived and arrested him because they could not understand what he was trying to sign to them. He was later released that day, but his partner came back and beat him again because the cops, even though they knew someone was deaf there, were not willing to bring someone to interpret for him. So now that we actually see that the problem reaches farther than we thought, let's see why it even exists. Why the stigma of a deaf culture, why no one is interested in them. Our lack of knowledge actually causes a rift between the deaf and the hearing. Another phrase you might hear is non-deaf. That refers to those that can't hear. Have been nothing short of hostile in the past. According to Angie Martel's Understanding the Injustices Faced by the Deaf Community, the 20th century brought forced sterilizations to the deaf. People were forced to be sterilized. That way the deaf disease was not spread. And while maybe back then it was less understood, that is a very extreme take on the matter. Another person that we might have all heard of, great inventor Alexander Graham Bell, was actually kind of despised by the deaf community. Because of his invention with the telephone, he became a household name. And like his father before him, he had studied speech and what the mouth looks like when we talk. So he figured that if he could study that, anyone that's deaf should have to learn to read lips, should have to learn to speak, should not be able to learn sign language, which is their own language. Someone who, to the average American citizen, is an inventor, a great person, forced the deaf community to be downtrodden and oppressed. Our own American systems actually failed as citizens. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, has been around for 25 years, yet still doesn't adequately provide for any deaf citizens. Actually, in the state of Michigan, they set aside $785,600 in 2015 for the deaf and servicing them. There are 866,879 deaf citizens living in Michigan. While the numbers seem a little skewed, there was $23 million set aside to service only 199,000 blind people. Now, I'm not saying we should take money away from the blind, not at all. But the fact that for every blind person there's over $100 put towards servicing them, yet for every deaf person there's less than $1 put towards them. That is something that is not talked about, but is still a wide issue. We're dealing with a big problem, but the answer is actually simpler than you'd think. It's simply learning. Despite the hardships, most deaf people are actually, as Angie Martel put it in her work, a vibrant and incredibly warm community. Though they've been oppressed, they are still welcoming to those who want to learn and want to use their language and learn about their history. By simply taking an interest in deaf culture and telling others, we can actually slowly change the stereotypes that the deaf need to be over here and the hearing need to be over here. It's just like any other stereotype with any other ethnic group. That's what it's become almost. And we're up in arms this day and this year with so many different riots and other things and standing up for equality, but the deaf who cannot hear have no voice. They can speak out, but not many hear them. We need to stand up for them. That's how we can change this problem. Eventually, by us, it's not going to be quick. But by us standing up, taking an interest in deaf culture, telling others about it, it'll trickle up to those who actually are in charge, and hopefully will actually affect change in the future. As we conclude, we now see that the problem, which is quite big, has been under our noses this entire time. And it's ignorance to deaf culture. It's nothing more than that. It has been either ignored or oppressed over the years, and that needs to change now. We can say that to help the deaf, we need to enforce the programs we have. We need to get them interpreters. We need to develop technologies for them, which there are technologies to help. There are interpreters coming in every day. But the real truth is, the problem isn't what they don't have. It's the fact that we don't care enough to learn about them, to learn about a subculture that exists all around us. if the ignorance still persists, then the problems will never be fixed. Thank you.